Let's go. It's Snap for Pastime with Drewberry, and this time we're talking about the next card coming to Marvel Snap, and that is going to be the Cull Obsidian. 410, you can only play this where you have a one-cost card. Man, let me tell you right off the hop, what I think about this card is power creep. We're going to dive into that a little bit because it's becoming a little bit too real for me lately with the, next batch of DATAMINEs and some of the cards that have come out recently. And there's just a few cards from like the OG set of Marvel Snap that you could say that are just kind of getting trounced on. And I hope they get reworked or changed. Seems like that's what's going to happen in the future. But here we have this big stat dump. There's this big idiot is what you can call him, but we're gonna dive into the mechanics, the counters, some deck lists with this card. But first we got to talk about the spotlight caches. So you got Nimrod and Thanos. So this is a pretty fire spotlight cache week, I would say, mostly because of Thanos. In my eyes, Thanos is a must-owned card in Marvel Snap. He's just really good right now, but he always tends to find a way, in and out of the meta. There's been only I can think of 1 or 2 months where he wasn't relevant, and then he finds a way. He does well with Lockjaw or just a lot of big cards, the Blob obviously recently. So yeah, just if you don't own Thanos, I would try and pull for him. If you do own Thanos, bro, go for that variant. Isn't that variant just fire? Of all the old school classic comic style variants, this one is just killer. The Infinity Gauntlet, let's go. And then Nimrod's chilling there. I mean, he's a series 4, but really the prize is Thanos, man. That is just so sick. So, and the new card, of course. We got to talk about the new card. So let's get to the mechanics of Cull Obsidian. So at first glance, I would say he doesn't have a whole lot of mechanics. It's a pretty straightforward, simple ability. But there's a couple of really interesting facts about this card that we have confirmation from Glenn, the balanced developer for Marvel Snap. And here's the biggest thing. You can play a 1-drop and Obsidian in the same turn. So let's say it is turn 5 and you've got Nightcrawler and you've got Cull Obsidian. You can literally put Nightcrawler onto the board as long as you play him first. It's going to register that there is a 1-cost card at that location, and then you can play Cull Obsidian. You don't have to wait until the next turn. You don't have to set up having that 1-drop there, and then you can play Cull Obsidian. No, you can, what they call it is staging, right? So when you're playing cards, but you haven't clicked end turn yet, you're staging the board to see what you want to do and lock it in when you click end turn. Well, you can stage a 1-drop and play Cull Obsidian there, which is just nuts. That makes this so much better, I think, because the condition, it's just so simple. It was already kind of simple. This makes it even easier to achieve. Now, mind you, that is not all just amazing, right? Because now we could almost look at this as a 5-cost card because you got to play that 1-drop. It's going to be a 1-cost. You're going to spend that 1 energy most likely at some point in time, even though there's some synergies to be had there. But you could look at it like a 5-cost, and then let's say it's a 2-power 1-drop, so that's 12 power. And that's still premium. That's still very, very good. It's on 2 spots of the board. But I think ultimately all of those little, conditions aside, those little micro details, I don't think they amount to a whole lot to get in the way of making Cull Obsidian irrelevant. I think he's going to be just fine. You're going to be able to play this card no problem. It's going to work with your strategy. Maybe you already had a 1-drop out there because there's a lot of good 1-drops that you play early, and then you just put Cull Obsidian behind it. So just to clarify, it has to be a base 1-cost card. So what I mean by that is there's the Morales, there's the Stature, there's all those cards that end up becoming cheaper if you achieve a little mini quest, right? Miles Morales, he moved a card, now he's a 1-cost. Well, when you play Miles, even when you stage Miles, even though you only spent 1 energy, he reads as a 4-cost card. So it's not going to work with Cull Obsidian. You won't be able to play Cull Obsidian on turn 5 after playing Miles Morales at a location. Okay, so base 1-cost cards. And that goes for if their cost was increased as well. If you got smacked with Iceman or Baron Mordo or whatever, and you happen to play that 1-drop that's no longer looking like a 1-drop, well, it'll still work with Cull Obsidian. He can be played at the spot of the little guy. Another fairly obvious point, but I just want to get it out of the way here, is that you cannot override other card and location restrictions. So a very quick example is if you have Nightcrawler, right, and you move Nightcrawler over to Sanctorum, well, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you can play Cull Obsidian there, right? It's still saying you can't play cards here, even if there's a 1-drop. doesn't matter. Those are kind of like the conditions are going to stack. The location has its own respective restriction that we have to respect, and then Cull Obsidian has his own. So if that happens, that's not a very good scenario. But what could be a very cool and fun scenario is if you move Nightcrawler, you can then play Cull Obsidian to the moved location, and that's going to surprise the heck out of your opponent. All of a sudden, there was just like a 2-power Nightcrawler chilling on the left, and then the turn starts, you see it move to the right, and there's a face-down card at the right location, and it happens to be a 10-power Cull Obsidian. That could be really sneaky, man. I think that'd be quite a bit of fun, especially if you wait till like maybe the last turn to do this. That'd be surprising. People might be like, oh, it's probably a Cull Obsidian deck because they have like Scar, or who knows, like some 1-drops, but then all of a sudden you move the Nightcrawler and bam, the power's over there. It could be a lot of fun. So that's pretty much it for the mechanics. If there's any questions that you got, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to help. But some of the pros here, it's pretty obvious, man. Premium stats. He's just a massive, big dude who's just going to provide you a lot of stats. 410 is not a stat line that we're unfamiliar with, but it is unfamiliar when the condition is so easy to meet and there's no onboard downside. It's crazy. You look at Typhoid Mary, she's giving out -1 power to the entire your side of the board. That's like a reverse Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is a 5/3 card. So like that's a pretty heavy-handed downside that can be mitigated with things like Sauron or Zero. But Cull Obsidian, man, he once he's on the board, he's just 10 power. That's it. You're good. Even Sentry is giving -10 power over to the other side. So it almost levels out as 0 for 4. But of course, there's a Nihilist and these things that can take advantage of moving over the void, destroying it, what have you. But you don't require any further assistance or support to get the use out of this card, the 10 power, other than just having a 1-drop on the board. And like I said, I think that is just so incredibly easy to do. So it's just brainless, dude. It's just brainless. It's going to be great in a lot of players' hands because they don't have to think too hard. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's probably legit going to inflate the win rate at least 1 to 2%. And not to mention that we're at the start of the season and everybody's playing against bots. So win rates are just inflated like crazy right now. So I have no doubt that he's going to come out strong. He's going to be at like 55 probably right off the gate. That's my prediction. Anyhow, next up is the cons because it's not all great. For instance, one of the most popular tech cards and popular cards in general in Marvel Snap is Shang-Chi. And, well, Cull Obsidian, he's got 10 power, so he's in Shang-Chi range. He can get sniped. You got to watch out. It's probably the #1 counter to this card. The other thing is that some decks don't use a whole lot of 1-drops, so now you're relying on drawing that 1-drop earlier than Cull Obsidian so that you can actually play this on curve when you want to play it. That actually will be a real problem. Even if you're running 2 or 3 1-drops, they could end up at the bottom of your deck. You don't draw them, and then this is essentially a dead draw. It's going to hurt, but there's ways to get them out with other means, like, I don't know, Jubilee or whatever. That's probably going to make it just worth it and fine. And maybe you're just going to start playing Quicksilver. That'd be crazy, eh? Quicksilver just to do a turn 3 Quicksilver for turn 4 Cull Obsidian. Or turn 1 Quicksilver, Zabu, Cull Obsidian. How about that? What a line. Oh my gosh. And then, yeah, the net result of that, if you never have that 1 cost on the board, a location doesn't spawn any 1 cost like the Ninja or the Squirrel, what happens? Well, he's literally unplayable. And that's not great. We don't like to put cards in our deck that end up unplayable. We like to play our cards. So, yes. Of course, if that happens, it's going to suck. It's going to make this guy look really bad. I just think that's a very rare instance. And maybe I'm overestimating that, but you know, man, how many times do you play with like Nebula and you get it like pretty early on or anything like that? You just run like 2 or 3 1-drops. You'd have to get very unlucky to not draw them by turn 3 or 4. I would say one of them anyhow. Okay, so let's move on to some counters if you don't want to pick this card up. But before we get to the counters, actually, I want to talk about power creep. So look at this, man. Just look at this. Even if you think that, for whatever reason, you think that these cards are the same power level, right? Aren't they just way too similar? You've got a 4-drop with a good stat line. I like a Cull Obsidian's a little bit better. Even though Crossbones dodges Shang-Chi, I still like Obsidian a little bit better. And Obsidian has the easier condition to meet. Playing a 1-cost card and then playing Cull Obsidian there is easier than winning a location. Both require a card to be at that location, most likely, unless your opponent's playing like the Hood or something and giving themselves negative power. More than likely, you're going to have a card there. So the whole like taking up spots doesn't even matter. And winning is tough, man. Sometimes you're not winning the location until turn 6. At least on turn 6, I know that Cull Obsidian can be played or not because I have a 1-drop somewhere. even if they destroy them with Killmonger. So I just feel like Cull Obsidian eclipses Crossbones, who's never really been a very good card, and Cull Obsidian is just easier and more power. So, but let me know what you guys think about power creep in Marvel Snap. I think there is somewhat limited design space, but man, I'm probably above all other creators, I have read the most custom cards made ever, right? We do it with custom card challenges all the time, and let me tell you, there are a lot of creative potential ideas for Marvel Snap cards, despite only a few keywords and interactions in the game. Like, it's not actually that limited. So to see this so early on, really, a year and a half into the game, I'm kind of shocked. I don't love it. I don't love it. I feel like we could have done something else, and maybe Crossbones gets reworked, but you should have done that maybe sooner, maybe before this new card comes out. It does seem like a bit of a money grab. Anyways, let's get to the counters. So I already mentioned the #1 counter, that being Shang-Chi, destroying this guy, 10 power, easy target. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Another one could be Killmonger. Now, because we can stage the 1-cost cards, this isn't as bad as I thought it was originally going to be. But if you do happen to play your 1-drops early, they are vulnerable to getting sniped by Killmonger. And if they do, then you're not going to have a 1-drop to support Cull Obsidian, which is going to be a bit frustrating. Another one is Jean Grey. Pretty interesting, right? If you play Jean Grey in a location away from the 1-drop that's already established on the board, your opponent then can't play that Obsidian, because they got to, well, unless they play something cheap at the Jean Grey location first, then they play Obsidian off of it. But ultimately, with the energy totals, that's probably going to get a little bit complex, a little bit awkward for their hand. So I could see Jean Grey being a bit disruptive, but she's never really taken off as that disruptive card that she was hyped up to be, or at least that I thought she was going to end up being. And it's been like several months. Anyhow, another one is Goose. Now, of course, you can use Zabu to discount Cull to 3, and then Goose isn't a problem. But if you don't happen to have the Sabretooth on the board, then this little cat is going to give you a hard time, because you can't play Obsidian at the Goose location. And if they put Goose where your established 1-drop is, well, then that's just tough. But speaking of established 1-drops and setting up a trap, Negasonic is probably one of the nastier ones, and I really like this because this guy used to have the tag can't be destroyed, ongoing can't be destroyed, and his text was significantly different at that time, but he can be destroyed now. He's very vulnerable to being destroyed, and Negasonic can really make work of that by being played at the location where there is a 1-drop on the board. If you're looking at that turn 4, maybe they got Zabu out there, it's turn 3, you might just want to throw down Negasonic in anticipation that this guy's coming out, and then you could destroy 10 power off the board, which is going to be a huge swing. So I really like that as an option. And then, man, I was struggling to find counters for this guy, but another one maybe is Magneto, because he's a 4-drop. So your power total could be shifted to a different location. But then you're matching up your Obsidian with Magneto, which is probably going to be just fine anyways. So I don't even know if that's really a counter. Stretching it a bit. Okay. Speaking of stretching, I got some data mines, and let me tell you, there's not a whole lot of data mines nowadays. They're pretty tight about it, so we only have a couple of months, and there's not a lot that really work with this guy, but I did kind of find 1.5. Let's check it out. All right, so I'm kind of just joking here with one of them, obviously being J. Jonah Jameson. Let's go, JJ. Oh, man, it would be funny if this card arrived. We always thought it was going to arrive in April. For April Fool's Day, and maybe that'll still happen, but still haven't seen them. Or maybe you should just be on a location where it spawns one for each on each player's side of the board, so it becomes funny. You can just start emoting at each other. I don't know. Anyways, that's just the joke. He's a 1-drop, so obviously you can play Cull Obsidian there. But the real one, in a card that's actually going to be releasing next month, is War Machine, a 4/6 on reveal until the end of next turn. Nothing can stop you from playing cards anywhere, which basically makes Obsidian just a 4/10 without a condition. Easy, you know? You play War Machine on 4, and then on turn 5, you can play Cull Obsidian wherever you want. You don't need a 1-drop. So that doesn't seem too bad, but I don't know if they'd ever be worth running together. It is in the same energy cost for discounting with Zabu, so you could put Zabu out there to discount both those cards, and that could be nice, but other than that, I don't know, might be too clunky for me. All right, let's get to the deck lists. So I feel like this guy could fit in a lot of decks, but the most popular one, and I think everybody's going to be gravitated towards, is probably the big blobby boys. So it's just your blob Thanos deck, really. But now we're sprinkling in Cull Obsidian. I try to put a little unique twist on it. We got a new Omega Red because, you know, that could be nice coming out of the Lockjaw location with all your other crazy big cards. And then usually this finds a way to be wide, so we could just pick which location we want to plant that Omega Red. We also got Black Swan to discount all of those stones. We could throw them into the Lockjaw location or just, I don't know, play them out. The Nightcrawler, that sort of thing seems pretty nice just as a turn 3 play into turn 4 with a bunch of 1 costs. Gonna make it free, right? You play Black Swan on 3, and then on turn 4, your Infinity Stone is free with Cull Obsidian right behind it. So that's just great. If it's like the Power Stone, that's 3 power, and then he's 10 power, boom, 13 power play on turn 4 for 4 energy. Unreal. Not to mention, if we just want to pass the turn, you could play She-Hulk afterwards because you can play Black Swan on turn 3 and then on turn 4, just play some 1-drops that you have in your hand without spending any energy. And then on turn 5, your She-Hulk's going to be super discounted. And then you can play Cull Obsidian, all that sort of stuff. And then Blob, obviously going to reap a lot of benefits from getting a lot of power from all of these high power cards that are in the deck, as well as Scar. And I wanted to put Scar in a few more decks, but I ended up just deciding to keep him in one because it's a pretty great combo. Another crazy combination I was thinking was maybe this works in a destroy list because you can eat it up with Venom, and you can also just have X-23 on the board, which can get destroyed by Killmonger no problem, bounce around and give you opportunities to play Cull Obsidian in various locations, as well as Deadpool, who gets destroyed, goes back to your hand, and you just keep doing that. So I think Destroy actually has potential to make use of Cull Obsidian. But another one is the 410 Control. So I was just looking at the 410s that exist in Marvel Snap. I thought these 3 could work pretty well together in a list like this, a bit of a control list with the Annihilus package being Annihilus, Sentry, and Hood. Hood gives us multiple opportunities for Cull Obsidian because we can play the Hood and then Cull Obsidian right behind it, or we can play the Demon with Cull Obsidian for a lot of power. The Hood is fine to play with Cull Obsidian. It would seem not so great because you only get 7 net power, but if we have Annihilus to shift it over, then it's just fine. Another one is Elektra. I know I'm kind of just mixing it in as a random addition, but I think Elektra is kind of being slept on, dude. It's a pretty decent tech card that can surprise a lot of people for very low cost. So you'd have Elektra out there, Nebula to just get a lot of power, Professor X to lock things in, Jeff to jump to Professor X lane if we need it, and Alioth as our finisher, or Annihilus as the finisher to shift over a bunch of negative power stuff. So yeah, I have high hopes for this deck. I run very similar decks to this very often, so I think this one's going to perform pretty well. And lastly is the Obsidian Zoo. I don't think this is going to be good, man, but it seems interesting with this card because of course you want to play a lot of 1-drops. And Cull Obsidian might help you out. But there's a lot of low win rate cards here. Looking at Martyr, the worst card in Marvel Snap. Titania, not a very high win rate card either, but both have 5 power for 1 cost. So I thought maybe there's a way, especially if you could throw down Cull Obsidian. It seems all right. You got Black Swan to discount all that stuff. Squirrel Girl to give us a guaranteed play. You know, it's like Squirrel Girl eliminates the condition of Cull Obsidian because there's now a 1-drop in each lane. It's great. Same with Shauna a little bit. You can use Shauna as a late game play. But ultimately, we're looking to buff up things with Kazar, Blue Marvel, and Cull Obsidian. Hopefully just carries the lane with some other 1-drops and fill it up with Elsa, Angela. I don't know. It seems fun, but I don't think this type of deck ever compares when you're looking at the power output from big blobby boys over there compared to the power output of this deck. No shot. Maybe we sub in some tech cards, but then it's like you're losing that consistency of having a lot of 1-drops and filling the board. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe not a very good deck, but the whole archetype, the whole zoo archetype doesn't really seem to work in Marvel Snap. All right, time to decide if Cull Obsidian is a snap or a pass. Cull Obsidian is a snap. Even though this card is a Series 5 card costing 6,000 tokens, I think he's worth it, dude. I think you'd be missing out to not have this big power play. I have made the mistake, and I say this all the time, but most notably with Blob, I was like, well, Blob's a lot of stats. It could be 30 stats, but what do you really need a big stat dump? It's like, oh yeah, this game is actually about winning with power on the board. So yeah, stats is very good when you don't have to pay a lot for it. And that's what this guy's doing. And his condition isn't so bad. If you like Crossbones, if you've ever found success with Crossbones, then you're going to love this card. This card's going to do work for you. So I think he's pretty well worth it. And if they did nerf it, it's a difficult spot without, you know, they'd have to change the ability somehow, right? Maybe make it a 2-cost card or something like that. That could be actually pretty severe. But with Cull Obsidian, like you drop 1 power, you make him a 4/9, and now he's not in Shang-Chi range. So there's like a little bit of upside there. I think they very specifically made him a 4/10 to be in that range. So anyways, I think this card is going to be pretty good, even if he's not very fun. He's not very exciting, right? That there's could be so much more creativity put into some of these cards. Card like this, anyhow. I think that this one seems to have slipped through the cracks, even though it'll be pretty strong and relevant, in my opinion. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Cull Obsidian in the comments below. If I missed anything, combos, counters, all that sort of stuff, let me know. I want to hear it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you guys next time.